Hello and welcome to today's session. We're going to be exploring the opportunity to reduce insider threats and how those can be managed through administrative controls. The vehicle that we're going to be using for this is a review of last year's Verizon data breach reports and looking at some of the trends from the Verizon reports over the last 11 or 12 years. My name is David Dingwall. I'm a cybersecurity strategist for Help Systems. What that means is I spend a fair amount of my time working with our customers, finding out how their business work and their technical work changes as they use our products, and always looking for ways to improve how we do things going forward. Today's session, we're going to be looking at some general market trends, looking at the business side of breaches and insider threats, looking at the compliance and business risk, typically not something that you would hear from a security vendor. Let's have a look specifically based on the data from the Verizon report about how your industry might be exposed compared to others, and looking a bit more detail inside your organization about who now owns the risk on behalf of the business. Then we'll get into looking at why administrative controls need to be applied because we've changed the way we're looking after production support. So looking at DevOps and the increasing pace of the Agile methodology and its rhythm as it applies to security. Lastly, we'll touch off with a piece of commercial reality. We need to be very clear and understand who we're selling to and why, and what their appetite is for products in this space to protect against insider threats. Some general market trends before we get into that. Of course, cloud deployment is massively important. Recent reports are saying that 95% of organizations are already using hybrid cloud. And within the next 2 to 3 years, 99% of all organizations will be operating in hybrid mode. It's important for you as a hybrid cloud customer to understand that the security policy management and definition using these new infrastructures is still very much residing with you and your team. Other competing pressures, cloud technology is now 15 plus years old, is now a mature environment with quite robust ecosystems around about them. That means that your finance team, who are being advertised and messaged to on a regular basis, are being fed information about next year's pricing deals. Your procurement teams, just like they were when they were looking at in-house infrastructure, are looking at dual sourcing relationships. If one particular cloud vendor has difficulties or problems and falls by the side, your business needs a contingency to be able to swap over to a different supplier. Of course, in this hybrid world, there's some interesting strategic alignments between VMware and AWS. VMware with a very large enterprise private cloud business and offering the opportunity to migrate into public clouds using AWS zones around the world. And a similar alliance with Cisco with their server and networking infrastructure and the Google Cloud worldwide. With cloud computing being a mature technology stack, of course, the purchasing decision is no longer with your IT quotes cloud specialists because it's seen as a mature business and they're seeing market data from other suppliers and other customers. Your finance team is very much in control. They're the ones pushing the button to change your cloud supplier on a year or 2-year basis. And IT very much has to follow on behind those business decisions. Let's look at the insider threat scope as reviewed by the Verizon Data Breach Report. The 2018 report says that 27% of all breaches started inside your organization with your own staff. Another 2% were breaches facilitated by contractors and partners, trusted partners who are part of your service and supply chain, and another 2% was a combination of your own staff and partners. So over 30% of breaches that we see annualized on a year-on-year basis is pretty much guaranteed not to go away. Obviously, outsider threats are much more variable. The way outsiders breach and get into your organization and infrastructure can change very much from a year-to-year basis. But looking at the trend over, say, the last decade, the insider threat size has scaled from about 29 to 37%, and it's stayed within that band over the last decade. So there's nothing to say that this will change or disappear or reduce to any great extent going forward. So that means when you are evaluating risks to your business, the very stable risk that's not changing very much is something that you need to have contingency plans, tools, and technologies in place to handle. It's a bit more difficult to plan for something that you don't know is going to happen, but if you can plan to protect yourself from your own staff, then that's something you seriously have to consider and have a plan in place. Otherwise, if you are breached, then the auditors are going to start asking some very uncomfortable questions. The other side effect of a very steady insider threat is you can actually apply a budget to it. The business risk can translate into a budget figure that can then be applied to selecting tools and services from external suppliers. Looking at your executives and boardroom members, their challenges, the risk to their whole business, has increased the priority for cybersecurity, especially in North America, as we've all seen with some very public breaches over the last 3 years. North American CEOs are saying that cybersecurity is the largest business risk to the sustainability, reputation, and costs of just running a business. In other regions, it's not quite so high up the scale, but it's definitely within the top 10. In Europe, number 6, in South America, number 7, in Japan, number 8, and in China, it's at number 10. So cybersecurity is something that if you're talking to your board level members, they do have an appetite to make sure that the current posture is still current and correct. And if you're in North America, the opportunity to build a business case to change the technology or change the service that you have, there's still a great opportunity for you to build a business case and have a reasonable assumption it will be taken under serious consideration by your CEO and your finance directors, the people who hold the budgets. Interestingly, though, if you look at privacy regulations and compliance regulations and how that relates to the concerns of your board level members, they're telling us that in the main, complying with market and vertical regulations or complying with privacy regulations around the world is not such an extreme concern, which is interesting because we, like many other organizations, have been talking about compliance risk quite a lot in the past 2 years or so, mainly with GDPR in Europe. But there are over 32 privacy regulations that are national based around the world, in Brazil, in China, in Russia, in the Middle East, that you also have to comply with if you have business operations or customers in that region. So it's very interesting that we, for this session today, we're very much focused on the immediate need of the insider threat as an issue, not so much of its knock-on impact to the failure of meeting compliance regulations or audit. So it does tell you something about how you frame your argument with your board level members when you're pitching or proposing a change to the solutions that you're using. Looking at the way breaches happened through 2017 and into early 2018, the first column is the actual data from the Verizon breach report itself, broken down by market sector, the way that they break out markets around the world. And interestingly, the highest breach sector is public and government. around the world, people trying to get in for various reasons. So it's by far the largest. The next highest is manufacturing. It's now something like 56% of all breaches are based in small and medium-sized companies, and a fair substantial number of those are in manufacturing and supply businesses. Slightly smaller in the middle would be professional services. These are organizations like law companies, people providing consulting services, people providing HR and payroll services. And then below that, healthcare and education and finance. At the bottom of the list would be information companies like online companies, primarily like Facebook and Google. Accommodation and hotel and entertainment business had one major breach through 2017. And then in 2018, again, there's one major breach with the Starwood chain. Interestingly, focus of previous years over the last decade has been retail and energy and utilities. Both of those were not breached during 2017. So it's interesting to see where you are in these categorizations. The issue I wanted to bring out for us as a security vendor is to give you a feel for where our customer base, who we've been selling to over the last 10 or 15 years. And this is data not just from Help Systems, but from a pool of security vendors in this space. In the way we've been selling, we've been providing solutions in the finance and banking market now for about 20 years. And they are our number one customer base and our number one buyer. Obviously, the regulatory market in finance is quite severe. There are some regional variations. So if you have an international bank, they have to comply with regional finance regulation as well. So having a solution that can report on multiple compliance environments concurrently is very important to them. Over the last 4 or 5 years, the information market, online businesses, mainly targeted at consumer data, personal data, people like Facebook, they have been applying a lot of money and time looking at the end-to-end completeness of the life cycle of your personal identity. And number 3, a very quiet sleeper has been energy and utilities. They have not really announced in public if they have been breached. They tend to talk to the regulator and everything is held pretty quietly behind closed doors. We suspect that everybody's waiting for a substantial breach to happen in the energy and utilities market. People are talking about they being one of the major targets in the event of a cyber war event happening. But so far, the other shoe hasn't really dropped there. But energy and utilities has been a very consistent number 3 for us over the last 20 years. Healthcare has picked up over the last 5 years. There was quite a lot of breaches somewhere between 3 and 5 years ago, specifically in North America. But this has then rippled out to other healthcare organizations around the world. Now, number 5 is the public and government sector. Interestingly, we sell substantial amounts of solutions to public sector bodies, and unlike some of our commercial and manufacturing organizations, we can't reference them because they require any information about suppliers that sell to government sector are very often highly secure and not publicized. We see a massive amount and opportunity for upsell and selling more into that market. Many public sector organizations have self-built security systems that have been built to try and save money in the short term. Many of those have been backed up by a very substantial number of people, security consultants looking and monitoring in real time. Recently, we have heard there have been occasions, especially during the US government shutdown at the beginning of this year. The first thing that happens is security contractors who are not government employees are exited out of the front door pretty quickly, which leaves the security system running without oversight and no one to take immediate action in the event that something happened. Luckily, the US government shutdown finished before things started getting too serious there. I want to specifically focus, though, on the manufacturing sector. It's the #2 market for breaches. Typically, people are going after commercial, confidential information, both on the finance side, but also on the supply chain side. If you're going after an organization in the mining business or car manufacturing, you're trying to find out how much supplies and component that your competitors have, but also how people are selling. So a lot of that is commercial fraud, not just going after the companies to shut them down, but to extract information that will be to your commercial advantage. And professional services is another one that is at risk, and not typically an area that has spent a lot on security software protecting against the insider threat. I know one or two of you on this session are from the education market. Again, the education market kind of associated with public sector from a financial perspective, or even if they're self-funded, they have not really been a vendor target for us in the past. That may have to change. Again, like professional services and manufacturing, it's personal information that people are going after. You may have heard the international challenge for people with cybersecurity skills or artificial intelligence skills, identifying the second-year degree class and getting that personal information out will allow organizations to target your students, entice them with commercial deals, so when they graduate, they will come and work for your company rather than someone else's. So what I want to try to extract from this is that there is an imbalance between the organizations and sectors that buy products in the insider threat space, protecting privileged accounts, multi-factor authentication, and the organizations and areas that are actually being targeted with breaches around the world. Specifically, the biggest concern are manufacturing organizations. There is a large disconnect trying to build a business case for additional protection for systems and processes in the manufacturing sector. And we as suppliers are working with our partners in particular regions to try and help you build better business cases, help you explain to your board and your executives why this is an important thing that you have to resolve before your next audit. Of course, things have changed in IT production support departments quite substantially over the last 2 or 3 years, starting with internet companies, but moving into multinationals and then moving into smaller organizations over time. In the past, the technical ownership of systems, networks, and processes was held almost on a proxy basis by your IT operations team, your IT service teams, and they took responsibility for various stacks of technology. In this example, the web front end, providing the web presence to customers and suppliers. In the middle, a data warehouse where all your customer data is being processed. And then at the back end, someone in the marketing team being responsible for modeling and external marketing programs. Some of those presented through the web, some of those presented through other channels online, so being connected to by LinkedIn, being marketed to by email. Now, this vertical view of the world has changed substantially. A lot of this has been driven by compliance regulations. So what we are seeing is board members being made personally responsible for the processing of customer and supplier data, regardless of which part of your technology and process stack that it resides in. For example, once you've captured a new customer, that goes into your data warehouse. That customer is modeled in another system in the cloud. You look at the market regulations. You or a nominated board member is responsible for the containment, storage, and processing of customer information as a conceptual process. So in this world, a more horizontal view, you may have a board member who's responsible for the customer experience, and the privacy of customer data. You may have a front-end team that's still responsible for the web presence. That may kind of align with the previous view from a vertical world. And then your sales and marketing team are separately responsible for the marketing program itself. So this is a big change for those of us who provide general security services in general, but for protecting against the insider threat. If your technical staff were aligned in a vertical method before, that's going to have to change. And we're now seeing DevOps support teams being more focused following business processes rather than being resident in one particular technology stack. But I'll pick that up again in a moment. Lastly, it has become significantly easier to scale out and deploy your organization's message and the way you interface with customers in particular geographies. There's no expectation that the way you deploy your business processes in your own region, in this example, we're talking about North America using internal systems, it may be just as easy to deploy in other geographies using a public cloud infrastructure, and not necessarily the same public cloud infrastructure. There may be pricing pressure, there could be a drive to implement with a particular technology stack because the consulting base in a particular region is stronger. So you may, in this example, the Google Cloud may be used in Brazil because it's a very large consulting base to help you implement and deliver the solution there rapidly. In the Far East, in this example, there's a very large OpenStack community in Indonesia, and they make it very easy to implement effectively a new private cloud solution in a data center that maybe you own or a trusted partner owns on your behalf. What's really important from a security perspective and looking and reporting on the insider threat is you better make sure your security policies are the same, that your exposure and the way you report back to your corporate auditors is exactly the same, regardless of how that data and processes are hosted in different regions. So let's jump into why administrative controls are really important when you're looking to protect yourselves from the insider threat. The first is the major change into production support using DevOps. As I mentioned, the more horizontal view of business processes and executive being responsible for them, there's then been pressure for production support teams to follow the business processes across different technology stacks. That means that the staff are multi-skilled. A person is no longer just a system administrator or an administrator for a particular application, or a DBA for a database, or a network specialist. You have multi-skilled staff who jump around different parts of your technology layers, your networking layers, and application layers to follow why an issue is going on, to make sure a problem is resolved. Also, we're seeing a significant amount of the use of contractors, people who are hired on managed contracts who may have a maximum period of a year, and then they spin out and go on another contract with another organization thereafter. The issue with having a single human being with the ability to jump around different parts of your infrastructure and different levels means that the segregation of duties where you could guarantee that a systems administrator couldn't make a change to a database, that clear separation no longer exists. It may be unclear which of your team member in your DevOps environment is actually doing the work and at what level. So you need administrative controls in your security system to ensure that that human being, as they're jumping around from nominal role to nominal role, to make sure that those are logged very cleanly, that the person is not doing something that could put your whole business at risk, and to make sure that what they're doing follows a regular pattern of behavior. So all this data is logged and will be used for user behavior analytics in real time going forward. There is one last issue with using DevOps. is that because staff tend not to stay around for as long, there's a major issue with live migrations of terabytes of data, either going from your own private systems into a public cloud or moving from one public cloud technology to the other because your finance department have found a better deal. So moving terabytes of data around is not a fun piece of work, and it's not an instant task. Protecting the data and making sure it is both auditable and is still compliant to the market regulation and compliance regulations that you have to comply to. You may have a copy in transit, you may have a copy that's being built in the new target zone, and you still have a live production environment at the source. All three copies of that are liable to compliance regulations, and we see a major gap in the middle where the data in transit is not being looked after by someone who's responsible and has to report to the business owner. This is something that we picked up in some detail in a previous session a couple of months ago. If you'd like to go and review that webinar, please do so on our website. So administrative controls specifically applied to staff and protecting your organization from internal threats. Gets interesting as we are moving into a much more agile world. The agile methodology has been around for more than 10 years now, but the pace of change and the pace of needing to change your business and being responsive is getting significantly faster. So I've already mentioned that a particular person may have multiple roles. We need to make sure that as they take on these responsibilities to do production support, that we know exactly where the person is and it's very clear how they can connect to systems, how they can connect to applications is rigorously enforced. We've seen some major changes coming from more stringent verticals like financial services, moving into retail and into payment card processing hosted environments, where the use of multi-factor authentication to prove the person who's doing production support is who they say they are. So MFA is now becoming a default way of logging into systems and applications going forward. You will see this yourself for your personal websites when you're being offered the use to use multi-factor authentication to access your Facebook account or Instagram. Exactly the same kind of pressure is being applied to commercial systems and online processes of all kinds. For example, various US government solutions now require multi-factor authentication. MFA is now default in international banking solutions pretty much worldwide. It's becoming the state of the art, and not having this applied to your environments, regardless of which vertical you're in, could be seen as a substantial business risk. MFA technologies have morphed and changed over the last 15 years, but the process and the solution and how it protects you, that story is pretty much done and ready. If you are not using MFA, then your business is at more risk from an organization that does, and you are exposed if you are breached and you're not using MFA. We all have legacy infrastructures, and those legacy systems may have undocumented ways in that a previous support team may have known about. There is an opportunity for a rogue staff member to install software that shouldn't be on your systems. So your security system needs to be able to protect from logging in or connecting with untrusted ways of authenticating users with passwords, using OTP, using old technology like insecure FTP or Telnet. So even if software is actually installed in your production environment, having a central control console to guarantee to your auditors that these insecure ways of doing things from the past cannot be carried out with a single click. Again, we've been using production systems and IT for more than 50 years. Periodically, auditors coming in to trawl your systems looking for stale accounts for staff and contractors who no longer exist has been a chore that gets carried out every 2 or 3 years, more so in financial services. With a side effect of compliance regimes, more recently, however, It does require you to ensure that as staff are rotating in and out of looking after your systems, you need to ensure that the whole concept of the stale user account no longer exists, that your workflows can be guaranteed end to end to provision and deprovision user accounts. And you can guarantee ironclad to your auditors that a stale user account does not exist in your live production environments, as your production environments are moving and morphing and changing very, very quickly. And then lastly, we all need to respond to security events exceptionally quickly. In the past, quiet, very careful breaching into customers and organizations just like yours would take days, weeks, and maybe months before they were discovered. With a fair amount of exploration, organizations getting in and looking at your systems, not actually wanting to take some action immediately. They're carefully staying themselves around your staff and your security systems, taking copies and control from you. Interestingly, at the beginning of this week, there was a very nice report from an analyst company who were telling us that once an organization that's sponsored by a nation state gets into your infrastructure, you only have 2 or 3 hours to respond from that initial footprint into the first system before they will expand very rapidly and sideways into your infrastructure and networks. So in the old days, having days or weeks or months to think about responding to being breached, a nation state actor, they want to get into your environments quickly. They want to be able to get information out of your systems extremely quickly. So as a result, your security systems need to respond very, very rapidly within a few minutes. The whole concept of a system flagging an event and giving it to a security team to consider and mull over a 4 or 8 hour period is no longer appropriate to the world that we're living in right now. So you need to make sure that the system can both prevent actions that shouldn't happen with your own staff, but if an external party comes in and takes over the account of one of your own staff and does something that's anomalous, that needs to be tracked, caught, and managed. And the system where it's happened needs to be isolated pretty much immediately. If your solution can't do that, then you are exposed and you need to consider changing what you're doing and looking at a solution to help you get into the right position for 2019. We are seeing another interesting change inside the security teams and the way teams are being split apart. It's been interesting for us as a security vendor, specifically providing solutions for identity and access management to improve and enforce the way internal staff log into systems and applications and how that control and manages the internal threat. We are seeing a view that's come pretty much from the banking environment, that they want security services that do enforcement and definition to be on one side of a wall, and then the audit and compliance is handled by a different tool and a different support team going forward. As a result, we, like many other security companies, are having to seriously replan the way we deliver products to customers and particular verticals. In the past, it's always been attractive to add as many new functions and features to our identity and access management solutions. It shows that we're delivering new functionality, we're providing more value. But what we're seeing is a pushback from organizations who have a clearer separation between security definition and the audit and compliance team. Specifically, the audit and compliance group work to one side away from your production support teams. They are very much an immediate response team, but they're also handling the reports for your operations environment, but also reporting back up to those executives who need to sign off and approve changes and are getting assurance that the security policies that have been defined in the more horizontal view of systems and process is actually being handled correctly. Lastly, these audit and compliance security staff interface to the internal auditing groups and external auditors. That means your production support administrators are not involved on the regular basis when an audit happens. This is a massive relief for DevOps teams not being pulled to one side and interrupting the cadence of the way they do their work. So as a result, health systems, like other companies, have families of security products, and we separate aside the enforcement side to protect against insider threat. We have another member in the same family of products with the same console that gives the same experience, that's very much focused to a different team of security staff looking at assurance, audit, and compliance. Lastly, we have to take into consideration the commercial realities of how we sell solutions and services. This story hasn't really changed in the last 10 or 15 years. However, the pace and the ability to consume a new solution or to change what they have in place has reduced significantly. So we're seeing international companies and enterprises who are happy to spend maybe up to $2 million or euros or yen to implement a new security system to protect against insider threat. The solution would be applied to all their servers, all their networking infrastructures, integrated with their HR systems, integrated with all the other provisioning systems that happens in a major enterprise. It does take a year or two to get these, the full footprint of this solution to be applied. And a large enterprise is very happy to do that, assuming the solution can be guaranteed to solve their problem across all the different geographies. A large company is a little different. We're typically seeing that a large company has been pounced on by an auditor, and there's a major security violation, a major audit item that has to be addressed, and suddenly money becomes available. Their pressure to get this resolved within 12 months is hugely important to them. They obviously want to get this fixed before their next annual audit. And as a result, they're willing to spend somewhere in the region of $500,000 to $1 million or euros to get this project implemented, to solve that specific large red flashing audit issue that has to be taken away and get it cleared up before the next major audit. Interesting for us as a solution and software provider is how we respond to dealing with the insider threat for small and medium businesses. As I mentioned near the start, 50% of all breaches happened in SMB companies around the world. They're not really geared up. They don't have large security teams. They are using a lot of the same IT and service and software components that larger organizations use. And as a result, the scope of the insider threat, how systems might be breached, how they might be abused, means that they actually need the same software. They don't need the cut down version. They need the same engine to deal with exactly the same problem. The issue for them, of course, is price and time. They have to resolve this issue. Very often they're responding to a particular breach, or they themselves have been pinged by their auditor. But their ability to fund such a project is significantly less. $30,000 is typically a median value for a divisional director or a small business owner to apply to solve a problem and get that problem solved quickly. That's a challenge. If you were basically using exactly the same software that an enterprise is using, maybe implemented on a smaller scale, but the same kind of granularity, their needs are very different. You know, a large enterprise is very happy to consume a security project, a major change project, staffed with consultants, setting aside some of their own IT staff. Somewhere in the middle for large companies, they want the problem solved reasonably rapidly. They will take some consulting staff, but they want their own staff to be trained. And SMB is not really geared up for that. They want security software to be installed instantly. They expect the software to have appropriate controls in place for the compliance regimes that they have to comply to. and they want this to happen without a lot of additional training for their own technical staff. They want it to be installed, they want it to just happen. That's interesting for us as a supplier as we are moving down to selling to SMBs. It means we need to provide templates for particular verticals and verticals in particular geographies. So we work with our partners in particular regions that service particular verticals, and we work with them to build pre-canned policy that would be suitable for an automobile maker or automobile service company in a particular region, that using exactly the same technical engine might be just as suitable for an insurance company in another country. So this is massively important for us for a product direction going forward, and something if you're looking for a solution for a smaller organization, you should be looking not just for the completeness of the functionality itself, but also how much security policy is ready and available to start from on day one. Rather than shipping an empty system that has lots of capability, an SMB wants a solution that can actually show that it's actually complying with the regulations pretty much straight away. This is certainly the way the world is moving, and it's certainly the way that data breaches are going. People are going after smaller companies that are part of larger organization supply chains to again get market information, not just breach them and shut them down. They want organizations to keep going, and they want market and business data from them. So Help Systems as an organization, if you've not worked with us before, we're very much a portfolio-based organization with a very large cybersecurity division. We are keenly aware that all of our customers are looking at their supplier relationships and reducing the number of suppliers year on year. So the more cybersecurity solutions that we can provide to our customer base and prospects, providing a portfolio of solutions, including protecting against insider threat, protecting against the transfer of business data from system to system or system to supplier, providing multi-factor authentication solutions is all part of the toolkit needed to protect against the insider threat. Just wrapping this session up, I just want to highlight again that the insider threat to you and your organization is not going away. Its percentage, when you're looking at all the breaches that happen year on year, varies a tiny amount, but has stayed very consistent. You need to think about protecting against your own staff, your own organization. If you're in the education market, it could be some of your students. You need to be able to pull together a business case to justify solving this problem, so your auditors are happy, to have a contingency plan in place when you are breached, not to assume you will never be breached, but to assume you will be, and here is your response to be able to save your organization's reputation going forward. As I mentioned, the outsider threat is significantly more variable, but it doesn't make the insider threat smaller. Many of the routes, once people get into your environments with malware, the first thing they're going after are user accounts, managers' accounts, and system accounts. Their route after their first step into your infrastructure is to go down the insider threat route to take over your systems and to get hold of your data. Thank you very much for listening to us today. If you want any more information, by all means, please contact us. Because we are selling more to small and medium businesses in many, many geographies, we're also interested to work with regional partners and distributors who have particular experience in their verticals, in their geographies, with their privacy regimes. So we're always looking for more information about how to customize our solutions to make them applicable for your market and your vertical. Thank you for listening to us today. I hope you will join us again in another month's time. We'll be picking up another topic in this general area. Thank you.